the Delaware Academy 2021 budget hearing, and I'd like to begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to introduce our superintendent, deputy superintendent for business. Yep, Carrie Schultz, and he will be going through the line items of our budget, and we'll be answering your questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. I think we're a little bit all out of our element in the fact of doing this hearing. In 15 years, we've never done a hearing with somewhat of a crowd here in this room and then a crowd virtually. So we'll do our best to present the budget for this upcoming year. And like Ms. Honeyke said, we will answer any questions after doing virtual login from participants. This year's budget, a little different than most. If I recall, back in February, we basically had a budget kind of figured out. We were ready to go. We had seen an increase of about probably $180,000 in state aid. That all quickly changed, of course, around March 13th and March 16th and March 17th when the district closed. And we ended up receiving new aid numbers probably about a month after that. Our spending plan kind of stayed the same. We were slated to go to about $20.6 million with about a $505,000 increase. The percentage increase in spending was about 2.5%. Proposed tax levy of 1.75%. That is in the same line with last year, and our tax cap limit for this year was 2.4. That tax cap limit, of course, was set many years ago by the state. It's a formula for municipalities they can't exceed a certain tax levy. If they do want to go above, if the district here wanted to go above the 2.4%, we would have to get a supermajority vote, which is 60% plus one of all registered voters. So we are not asking to get to the limit. We're asking to go to 1.75. So just to go over the vote process, this is a completely different scenario that all of us are kind of learning as we go along. May 1st, the governor finally came out and declared an executive order making sure that and stating that all budgets would be done with absentee ballots. In the past, it's every third Tuesday of May. Polls open up. This district does a 12 to 8. We have people coming in the door, voting, leaving. We tally the votes electronically at 8 o'clock. We move on. Due to the COVID-19 public crisis, the governor demanded that all districts, all public schools within New York State do an absentee ballot. That entailed sending out approximately 4,700 ballots to all of the registered voters that we pulled from the Board of Elections, local county list. We mailed those. They are all, we paid for the postage for you to return them. We are continuing to receive them now. And the cutoff date for that will be June 9th. And right now you can either send them in or you can drop them in person. We have at the main entrance to the middle school, high school building, you can go in through the front door. We have a ballot box there from 8 to 3, Monday through Friday. And that ballot box will also be there until 5 o'clock on June 9th. At 5 o'clock, no more ballots to be received on June 9th at the district, and we will begin counting. At that point, we will live stream the count process, and we will tally those. And once we have a number, we will announce that to the public. Like I said, the polls officially close at June 9th, 2020. We actually can't receive any more ballots after 5 p.m. So while we're talking about this, I'd like to read a statement real quick. Over the weekend, like I said, we sent these ballots out last week. And just over the weekend, it came to the district's attention that an error was made on the recently mailed absentee ballots for the 2021 budget vote and board election. This error located on the front page of the ballot states that the budget vote date is June 9th, 2019. Clearly, the date should read June 9th, 2020. As with anything that has the Delaware Academy name attached to it, our staff pride themselves in ensuring that accuracy is the utmost importance. Therefore, this error is something that we do not take lightly. In review, the mistake was simple human error, something we all strive to deter, but isn't always 100%. Immediately after hearing of this issue, the district contacted its legal counsel to ensure that the error would not hinder the budget vote or board election. We were quickly reassured that it would not be a problem, and the vote results for both the budget and the Board of Election will stand once they are tallied on June 9th, 2020. Therefore, the district will not be mailing corrected ballots at this time. The ballots that each registered voter have already received thus far will suffice. And thank you for your patience and understanding. So, like I said, we will slowly receive those. If you can't mail them and if you can't get, if you want, like I said, we will have ballot box. You can drop that off in person at the district up until 3 o'clock on Monday through Friday, and then 5 o'clock on the 9th. So putting together a budget, like I said, we were pretty safe. I thought back in February about building a budget, building a little bit. We were looking actually at that time about building in some additional academic instruction. And like I said, that kind of went away pretty quickly once the pandemic hit this state. The state at that point was about $6 billion in the hole. It had nothing to do with the pandemic at that time. It had to do with some Medicaid expenditures. But it seemed like the state was probably going to come out of it pretty well. We were seeing an increase in state aid, just like everyone else was. But once we received our new aid runs in April, they kept foundation aid flat, and that was the first of two things that happened. Foundation aid makes up about 30% of our total revenue for the district, and that stayed a little below $6.2 million. On top of that, they also took about $260,000 out of the original aid runs and then took money from the federal government that was given to states and replenished it. So they kind of took it away, but only to give it back by the federal government. Thank goodness they have giving some stimulus funding. Remainder of our aid, along with the foundation aid, is categorical aids. That's transportation expenses, building aid, hardware, which is computers, technology, software, and textbooks. Looking year to year from last year to this year, the district is actually seeing a small decrease in aid revenue of about $27,000. Now, this is not, a lot of the aid sometimes is you kind of have to estimate on what the state is looking at. Sometimes they take a very high number. For instance, when they were projecting transportation aid for districts, I'll tell you our district alone, they were projecting a $250,000 increase. We don't spend that much to get that aid back. So we are very conservative when we put our aid measures together. But in essence, about a $27,000 decrease from last year. And that's basically we're losing that foundation aid of about $180,000, and then some other items also that fell down and were slightly decreased. So almost a one budget to the next, same amount, but just a slight decrease. What we don't know right now is future aid cuts. When the governor put this budget together, he put together a budget that has 3 trigger mechanisms in it. One of them was April 30th. There's another one set for June 30th and one more December 31st. These aid mechanisms are based upon any type of, they will look at the projected revenues coming into the state at those 3 trigger points, and anything below 99% of what they projected will result in aid cuts to districts. So they've talked about 50%, they talked about 20%. We are looking, after kind of sifting through all the data, we're looking at what we think could be potential aid cuts going into next year. I would pretty much bet that they will happen at some point. When, we don't really know. There is talk at first that the first cuts would happen in September. Federal stimulus dollars, there is some talk right now about a state federal stimulus coming down the line. If that comes through, it would take care of the September cuts and possibly into the January and February cuts. So if we could get out of this maybe with 1 aid cut mid-year, that would be great. Right now, we're planning on 3 installments of aid cuts throughout the year. So we have budgeted within the budget here, I would say, safety nets to ensure that any of those aid cuts come through. We will reduce spending appropriately and then go from there. The April 30th trigger that already happened has not been publicized at this point. I think the governor is kind of holding out right now to see where the federal stimulus money comes in, if any, and before districts actually gouge into their budgets and then not have to. The issue, of course, is timing. We're going to try to have a budget approved and voted on next week. We don't even know what our real aid cuts are, if they even exist. So the timing could be a little tricky, but like I said, the district here and the board, we met multiple times to put together a package that would ensure that if those aid cuts came down, we're not gouging into academics and program. Estimated revenues, this is a balanced budget. Expenses at 20.6 million. Revenues have to be the same. Not many changes as far as revenue. We have a 1.75% increase in the tax levy. And then the other big increase you'll see is an appropriated fund balance and interfund transfers. This district's been very, very, very good in the last probably, I would say, 10 years of creating reserves, saving money. We've talked about rainy day money for situations like this. So we usually allocate some funding from fund balance or from our appropriated reserves to offset the balance the budget each year. We're allocating quite a bit more. We feel it's time that the way it goes right now that we will to keep program, to keep staffing and things of that nature. We decided to allocate some extra fund balance. It will not deplete what we currently have. We have enough to get along for multiple years, but we feel that we owe that to our students, especially we don't know where our students are going to be when they come back in the fall, but we want to make sure that we have the right staffing and the right academic structure to ensure that they're okay coming back. So that's where the revenue is. Like I said, the 1.75 is the additional for tax levy, and then the rest really is based upon fund balance and reserves. We see some dips in the A.L. Kellogg. A lot of that is based upon interest gained. We take a portion of capital from the A.L. Kellogg Trust and also a little bit of the interest. And with the stock market and the way it's been, we lose a little bit in interest and dividends. So revenue comparison between property taxes and state aid, you're looking at about 91%. So we're very heavily dependent on those two items. Fund balance reserve makes up about 5%. And then we have a little bit of extra revenue within there. Nothing much. 2% is basically, so we're very heavily dependent on those two items. All right, budgets compared. These are our line items. We split them up based upon function. Again, we're, like I said, the revenue's at 20.6 million. Our expenses are at the same, 20.626. And that's really not a lot of large increases. Pupil services, we have a large increase. That's where special education is. Pupil transportation, not pupil services. But we're looking at about 6.5% increase in pupil transportation, equates to about $75,000. That is mainly due to a bus lease that we're looking at. It's a capital expense that goes into that line, into the 5510 code. We've been leasing our buses for the last 6 years, I'm sorry. And this is a new lease that's being renewed. We're taking some buses that we currently own that are older, pretty heavy on maintenance costs at this point, and putting them back into a lease. So after this year, if approved, all of our buses will be leased and not bought outright. They'll all be up to date and under warranty. Employee benefits, probably the next biggest jump of about 4.27%. Our healthcare costs here are probably some of the best healthcare costs. We don't see a lot of big jumps. I've seen probably the highest is about maybe a 2.5% increase over the last 5 years. The plan we have is very strong. We're seeing a much bigger increase in here because we're seeing much more on the retiree health side, not the active insurance. We have a pretty decent plan that helps offset those costs, but As people retire, they go on to a retiree health insurance. We then bring in new staff to replace them. So now you have 2 plans instead of 1. So that's where you're seeing the 4.27% increase. Basically, just another pie chart of the categories: instructional, benefits, and general support make up probably well over 70% of almost 80% of the total budget. This just breaks down those categories. General support, it includes Board of Education, Central Administration, Legal Services, Business Office, Building and Grounds. There's a little decrease in that, about $20,000. Nothing was really cut out of it. It was just something that was budgeted in those areas this year that we're kind of moving. There was about a $10,000 reduction. We had centennial costs in there for this year. We didn't really get to capitalize. We capitalized a little bit on them, but obviously that is not going to happen in this month. So instructional makes up the largest piece of it. Teachers, you have support staff included with instruction. You have special education. It makes up most of the budget with any district. Senior increase of about almost $190,000. That's all based upon contractual. We didn't cut any program out of there. We didn't cut any practices or any, so everything that, field trips are still in there. PD, staffing. What we will have to see, materials and supplies, equipment, we will have to see is if aid cuts happen throughout the year, we will reduce spending in those lines though, to ensure that we're not overspending the budget. Pupil transportation includes buses, leases, bus garage. Again, that 6.49% increase is included in that. Employee benefits, about 4.3% we talked about earlier. Like I said, our insurance costs continue to rise at a pace much lower than the market, much lower than neighboring districts. And it continues to be very, very strong. And I think it will continue to be strong. I was just in a webinar the other day with them. I mean, this area is not seeing a huge increase because of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're not seeing the cases like they are in New York City. So we're not getting overtaxed here with this plan. Building maintenance, building equipment, maintenance of the building, overall cost, about $34,000 increase or 2.3%. And debt service is the last round. That is all the long-term debt that is associated with the district and past projects. We're sitting at about $7 million right now of long-term debt that's outstanding for the district. We've had a lot of debt come off in the past 5 years. We will see a little bit more come off, not for probably another 3 to 4. But in the meantime, with the 2018 project that was just voted in October of 2018, that will come back up. But that's already been approved. Staffing changes, we have 5 retirements, 1 elementary phys ed teacher, 1 middle school science teacher, 2 teacher aides, 1 building mechanic. We're looking at filling those positions. We won't be filling both teacher aides. We'll only be filling 1 of the 2. And then we're looking at the other positions now. Resignation for the 2021 season. We have middle school, high school music teacher that's resigning and moving on. And we are interviewing for that also. Quick snapshot of the property tax levy. Again, like I said, 1.75%. It was 1.75% last year. On average, we're sitting at about 1.3% on average for each year over the last 7 years. So much below the tax cap. We've never had to go above the tax cap, and our tax cap usually sits around 2 to 2.6%. The tax impact of this budget right here. And I usually look at most with STAR. We see most households or homes have STAR applied to them. On average, the average house in this district we've looked at before is about $115,000. So I always take the 100 or the 150 and look at what it would cost the taxpayer per month or per year. $100,000 house with basic STAR, you're looking at about $17 increase for the year or $1.40. And then basic STAR on a $150,000 house is $30 for the year, about $250 a month. And then we look at it. That basically is where we sit right now. We're on average about the same every year, whether it be anywhere from $2 to $3 a month for the $150,000 to $200,000 houses. One of the things, along with what we see, you're going to see on the propositions within the ballot are, we have an asbestos abatement project. In the fall of 2019, after doing some inspections underneath the crawl space of this building, we realized that there was some asbestos within the area, and not much at all, but because this whole crawl space underneath the building here is wide open, they consider it all contaminated. So 48,000 square feet, they consider to be compromised. We've done plenty of tests. There are no threat to any occupants within the building. Even when they're here, it's contained underneath. But the problem is the 2018 project that was approved in October of 2018, there is work that has to get done in that crawl space. And it's a plumbing job for the bathrooms that were approved. So we need to remediate that. And even if we didn't do the bathrooms, they are very strict on once you find out that you have something like that, you have to take care of it. So we have an asbestos abatement project to be voted on within the ballot. The cost of it is hard to kind of estimate at this time. Depending on the amount of, or the timing of the project, we decided, after speaking with bond counsel, we looked at a $1.1 million project. The district's very hopeful if we do it we're looking to do it possibly in a fall or late fall remediation. It would be much lower than that. We decided to go on the higher end for the bond request only because if the project comes in, if we lowballed it and we said it was going to be $500,000 and it came in at 600, we would have to go back out to get a vote. So what we will do is once the bids come in for the project, we will only borrow what we need. We will not borrow anything above what the bid comes in. So if the bid comes in at 500,000, that's what the bond will come out to be. The district will then take 28% of that, will cover it with reserves, and then the other 72% will be taken care of with state aid. So there's no additional tax impact to the taxpayer whatsoever for the project. Unfortunately, with this project, it was found after the fact, after the 2018 vote, and we had to, per state ed rules, we have to look at this as a completely separate project. So timeline, if it's approved this month, we will look to do the remediation in the fall or early winter of 2020. We do have timing to do it in the spring also and still probably recognize a much lower cost impact. The other item on the ballot is bus lease. It said earlier there's a 5-year lease, 8 66-passenger buses and 1 62-passenger bus with a wheelchair lift station. This was from 2015. We receive 55% state aid for transportation, and this applies also to bus leases and the interest and the principal for those leases. That's amortized over 5 years. So our payments are, it's a 5-year lease. We pay, we also get aid back in that next year. The district did quite an intense analysis of leasing rather than purchasing many years ago. And it's found that leasing for this district has been very, very seamless. It's great as far as budgetary wise, going year to year. It ends up creating a much better flow and trying to figure out and making large capital expenses each year on a bus. A bus of, probably a 66-passenger bus, you're looking at probably $120,000 cost. This helps build budgets out for a long time, helps with long-term planning. Plus, it also gives this district and the students and the parents some kind of reassurance that those buses are safe. They have some of the most best technology as far as camera units and safety measures. And so we've had very good luck with leasing, and we'll continue to do that. Board of Education, there are 2 3-year terms for the Board of Education. There's we have 4 people running: Kenneth Akins, Jonas Shaw, Kimberly Shepard, and James R. Tucker Jr. Tomorrow night, and I'll say this again probably in a couple slides after this, we will meet the candidates virtually. We will do a question and answer session, and then we will post that on our website at 6 o'clock. Real quick, because this is kind of in a different scenario, the whole budget process, the whole ballot process, kind of have to talk about what happens if the budget was defeated. In the past, what happens is if you vote in May, budget is defeated, what you turn around and do is you go back out and vote in June. Hold a normal election like you would in May. That's not the case here, really. There's no time to do that. There was nothing in the governor's executive order that addressed that. So basically what would happen is if the budget was voted down or defeated on the 9th, you have 6 days to go back out to vote and to put out another 4,600 ballots. Plus you have to advertise that vote within like a 14-day span beforehand. There's no way to do it. There's absolutely no way to do it. So what districts will do is they will be forced to go to a contingency budget. Unfortunately, there's just no way to vote in another budget or to go back and trim down the budget you had previously and reapply it to the public. So just, I want to make sure that we're clear if that question comes up. If it is for some reason defeated, we would have to make about $275,000 in cuts. And the reason why is because you have to take out capital expenditures. You have to take out certain expenses which are considered non-contingent expenses or ordinary contingent expenses, and you have to keep your tax levy flat from the previous year. So, just to throw that out there, because we don't have that second ability to vote. So I just wanted to make everyone aware of that. Again, just kind of a recap, proposed budget's $20,626,000. Dollar increase from last year is about $505,000. Percentage increase in spending, 2.5%. And the percentage increase of tax levy is 1.75. What else is on the ballot? We have Board of Education seats we just talked about, 2 vacancies. We'll talk about those again tomorrow night. Asbestos abatement capital project, $1.1 million, not to exceed. I will note on the asbestos abatement capital project, like I said, there's borrowing is only up to what the cost of the project is. We will not go out and borrow above that to use additional monies for anything. It is only for that project and only for what the bid comes in at. And we have a 5-year lease for 9 buses. Virtual Meet the Board of Education candidates is tomorrow night, June 2nd at 6 p.m. There will be no questions with that. That'll be a tape segment and then pushed off onto the website at 6 o'clock. So thank you. We have questions here on the computer, so I'll start addressing those and slowly go through these. Let's see here. Bear with me. Carrie Gracie says, what attempts have been made to find sources of state or federal funding or grants that may be available to help schools cover asbestos abatement expenses rather than using taxpayer funds? Could you give a breakdown of the pupil transportation amount budgeted and a detailed explanation of what makes up the majority of the 6.49% proposed increase? I'll address that. There's a second part to the question. Have we sought out federal funding or grants? There's no grants that I'm aware of for capital expenditures. Not that I'm aware of, not that there are none out there. We have federal funding that we do receive. This district receives probably about $700,000 in federal funding, but not for capital expenditures. It's a good question. I've been at this for 15 years. I haven't seen anything for that side of it. I don't know if there's anything out there, but it's worth looking into. Like I said, the federal funding, we see more for pre-K, which we did apply to last year, but was turned down, but we do get a lot in Title I, Title IIA, Section 611 and 619 grants. Pupil transportation budget, there's fuel costs that are associated with that. We saw a big increase last year with placement of students in other areas. And depending on the student, depending on the placement, sometimes we are obligated to transport those students. And that's just state law. So we've had some increases in our own students here, but we may have foster students that are being placed outside of the district where we're obligated in some situations to transport them. That includes a driver. We usually use a van for that, but you have additional costs associated with it. Then, like I said earlier, the bus lease, raises the cost a little bit. It's about $19,000 additional for one bus per year. Since many individuals receive more than one ballot and the voters have to provide their name on the ballot envelope, what safeguards have been put in place to keep votes confidential? And what would be the procedures to make sure no more than one vote has been submitted per person? Just like when you walk in to vote, there's a voter registry. So yes, we have people that need to sign the envelope stating they are who they are. We take that, we look at the registry. We then, once we take the document out, we do not match up anything with the vote and the person that's voted. Completely separate. So there is no link to what you have voted on and to the name at all. It's completely separate, and that's the way it's always been. So like I said, it's just the signature is more replacement for when you walk in the door and to see the election worker to pick your name. That's that piece of it. Like I said, and then the envelope has got, you get rid of that. Ballots are then counted later, and there's no indication of a name on that. Steve Little, thank you for your time. This question is not related to the budget. I've seen that there is going to be a simple or similar Q&A session with the potential board members. Is this true? And if so, when is it? Tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. Like I said, we will be here. We have a speech and debate club advisor that will be has crafted the questions. We'll ask each individual those questions, and then we'll have that up all the way from tomorrow night until probably 5 o'clock on June 9th for anyone to view to make a decision from there. How did a school building built in the late 1990s, 96-ish, have any asbestos-containing materials used in the first place? It's an older building than that. So this section alone, I think was, 39. It's, there are some, old technology and things like that change, and we have to kind of conform to that. So that's basically what happened. It's basically the plumbing underneath, what it's wrapped in. What are we possibly projecting a state aid reduction, and how will we handle it? We projected about $360,000 in aid cuts. That is based upon a 20% figure off of 3 installment times of payments. We looked at the September payment, which is our first payment to the district is considered lottery aid. When they first talked about these cuts, they looked at that number first of that payment. That's late September. We're basing those that payment. There's another payment in January, and then what they call a spring advance. And we took 20% off of those 8 payments, and went from there. How will we handle it? We put together a spending plan where it can be tracked on a monthly basis. And what we usually do is, for instance, when teachers want supplies and materials, or we look at doing work on a building and a budget is passed, we kind of open up those ordering times. We open up the work to be done in the summer, because we know that we're going to get a certain amount of aid. We know what our expenses are basically going to be. Here's a little different. We will be very careful on our spending and monitor that spending much more than what we would in the past. So for instance, some of the equipment that we would like to get is not something that we definitely are going to get. We're going to have to wait and see as we get through the year where our spending is, and figure it out from there. And so we have some kind of, if they've got trigger mechanisms on the revenue side for the governor, we have trigger mechanism here at the district to ensure that if we know we're hitting a certain point by a certain time, that we have to back off spending on those items. And we know what our contractual is going to be. We know what staffing is going to be. We know what health insurance is going to be. So we can those are givens. The other volatile expenses, we know those ones that we can control, we will try to control. Special education can get, up and down throughout the year, but we have built-in safety nets for that also. There's also, if we get to an issue where cuts are even more drastic than what are being projected, there are other areas the district has a right. There's a bill that has gone to both houses at this point, has not been voted on or approved, but would give districts the right to dip into reserves, which is your savings accounts, mid-year. Usually you can't dip into those until you start the fresh school year, starting of the year. You can't dip into a mid-year. They may allow districts to do that if needed. So we will look at that. Buses, have we looked at used buses? They look like brand new buses. No, we have not looked at used buses. We have With the lease, we end up with a situation where the parts are covered under warranty, so we found the savings there. We haven't looked at that angle yet, but we feel that the newer buses, once buses get older, unlike your car or regular vehicles, DOT becomes very, very strict on anything within the bus. Any rust on the frame gets pulled out, has to be redone. So we feel that, usually you see buses, they go about 7 years and they're pretty much done. And for school districts, the maintenance on them become a lot higher, a lot more expensive. So we have not looked at used ones. We've looked at more, like I said, the lease angle. CTEP contractual reduction of 75%. What are we cutting? That's from Will Austin. And I'm sorry, the last one was from Will also. I apologize, Will. We are looking at reducing the amount of placements. We ended up with, we had 12 originally. We are looking at bringing in about 8 or 9 students for that program going into next year. So that's where that one cut is. Retirement incentive. What are we trying to do here, and how many employees could be impacted by these dollars? We have not talked about a retirement incentive at this time. It's not something that we haven't really talked about. State is actually looking at one. I heard one it was probably about 5-6 weeks ago. They are talking about possibly imposing a retirement incentive at the state level. The conversation was, it's normally a 55 years of age, 30 years experience. They're looking at a 55-25. If the district decides to take part in that, then the district has to pay an increased percentage. So it's usually about a 3/4 percentage point. So if we decide to offer the state incentive and people take that, then we have to pay a little bit more on our normal yearly contribution. The district can opt out from letting individuals take that and then turn around and offer their own if they wish. But that has not been discussed, and I think that would be something going into next year that could be discussed, depending on the fiscal climate at that time. Central Services, BOCES print shop forecast 83% increase. We moved a software, and this is from Will Austin also. We have a print shop that we use. Actually, a lot of our large print jobs come from BOCES print shop, and we do that because we don't have the facility or the machines here to take care of those kind of jobs, and we get aid on it. The forecast is actually a Forecast 5 software that we pulled in. We get about 60% aid on that, actually. And so we're pulling that in, and that's forecasting it does both financial and academic forecasting for the district. And so we pulled that in mid-year this year and looking to keep it for next year. So that's all the questions that are in here. So I will wrap it up, and thank you very much for the few people that are here right now. This is just the board, don't worry. No one else is invited. And for everyone virtually for tuning in, and the questions are fantastic. We'll have the answers up on the website also. I'll put it there and probably in the district department link. And like I said, meet the candidates tomorrow night. Ballots due no later than 5 o'clock June 9th. And thank you very much, and have a good night.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schultz. We appreciate your presentation. I just want to make the public aware that Trustee Haight, Trustee Akins, Trustee Schneider, and Trustee Kelly are here with me tonight as well. And I would like a motion, please, to close the meeting. Thank you, Trustee Haight, and second, Mr. Akins. Thank you again, everyone, and please make sure you vote and have the ballot in by June 9th. Thank you.